This week in Idaho, the Idaho Department of Education looks to rewrite history with new study standards. Governor Little falls under scrutiny for possibly funding an anti-school choice nonprofit. Idaho lawmakers are divided on fetal development curriculum, and a bill to require Bible reading in public schools sparks debate in the Idaho Legislature. That and so much more. This is the Yokel Idaho Midweek Report, where we give you a quick overview of the news in Idaho for the last week. Hey, glad to have you here with us again. Thank you for the viewership you've been giving us, and also thank you for the wonderful feedback we've been getting on those Idaho Bill breakdowns. If you don't know what that is, go check out our YouTube channel or Twitter page. We have a post up there, or on one of our past midweek reports where we've announced that and stuff. It's just simple language for the different bills going through the Idaho Legislature to make it easier for you guys to know what is going on. That said, and speaking of the legislature a little bit, but on the big topic in it, education, the Idaho Department of Education, or SDE, if you've heard that acronym, has recently proposed a new K-12 social studies standard that appears to incorporate elements of critical race theory, or CRT, and related ideologies, despite previous legislation, if you remember, efforts to prevent it from being in Idaho's educational institutions. In 2021, Idaho passed House Bill 377, prohibiting public schools from compelling students to affirm certain tenets often associated with CRT or critical race theory, such as inherent superiority or inferiority basis based on race, or collective guilt for past actions. This law was part of a broader national trend of states taking action against perversive CRT influence in education. As for this issue, however, the newly proposed social studies standards seem to divert from the legislature's intent here in Idaho. They emphasize learning about, quote, indigenous people, women, African Americans, and immigrants, end quote, in the context of the American Revolution, potentially overshadowing the traditional focus being on the founding fathers in that revolution, what they were about. The standard incorporates post-colonial ideology, which is described as a, quote, intellectual sibling, end quote, of CRT. They include requirements for studying non-Western religions like Sikhism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, despite, we would argue, their small representation in the nation and even here in Idaho. As for the impact of it, these proposed standards appear to conflict with the legislature's previous directive, Senate Concurrent Resolution 116, if you want to go look that up, to create standards that emphasizes Western civilization, provides factual national history, focuses on founding principles, and cultivates patriotism. The Idaho Legislature will soon decide whether to approve these new standards, setting the stage for a potential conflict between CDE's approach and the previously established legislative intent regarding critical race theory and related concepts in K-12 education here in the state of Idaho. And speaking of education, one of the big ones has been school choice, and Governor Little's gotten himself in a little bit of scrutiny here. His administration is under a little bit of extra surveillance for allegedly funneling taxpayer money into an anti-school choice nonprofit. As for what that nonprofit is, the STEM Action Center, an organization under the governor's office, has reportedly directed over $1.5 million to Idaho Business for Education, or IBE, between 2024 and 2025. If that doesn't mean anything to you, adding a little context to it, this revelation comes as Little publicly supported school choice in his State of the State address, creating a stark contrast and a bit of a confusion between his words and his actions of what we're seeing at the moment. The funds sourced from the state general funds were labeled as, quote, miscellaneous expenses, end quote, and appeared to be related to a program called the Idaho STEM Ecosystem. As for the reaction on this, critics argue that this practice lacks transparency and accountability, questioning the use of public funds to support a nonprofit activity opposing a policy many Idahoans desire. In conclusion, the governor's office has not yet commented on these allegations, leaving Idahoans demanding answers and feeling like there's some inconsistency in Little's education policy. And speaking of education, but on another hot-button topic, Idaho's Senate Bill 1046, introduced by Senator Tammy Nichols, has sparked debate over fetal development education in schools. The bill, which would require 5th to 12th grade students to receive instruction on human growth and development, including fetal development, as part of the biology or sex health classes, The reaction to this, as you can guess, proponents argue it provides scientifically accurate information, while critics question the accuracy of proposed materials like the Baby Olivia video. You'll have to go look that up for yourself there. The Senate Education Committee narrowly voted 5 in favor, 4 against to send the bill for an amendment, keeping it alive, but signaling some potential changes coming ahead for it. Moving forward, this issue does highlight the ongoing struggle with sex education and the differing views of when life begins, which is at the core of the pro-life and pro-choice debate. And with that story that I teased at the top about Bibles and staying with education, the Idaho House Education Committee introduced House Bill 162, the School-Sponsored Bible Act, on Thursday the 16th. The bill, sponsored by Representative Jordan Redmond, proposes mandatory daily Bible readings in public schools. If passed, it would require students to hear from the King James Bible over a 10-year period. The bill provides for accommodations for objecting teachers and allows for parents to exempt their children if they think the Bible is such a dangerous thing they shouldn't be hearing it. This initiative follows a recent reinterpretation of the Establishment Clause by the Supreme Court, emphasizing historical practices that we've had here in America. You can't deny that we've used the Bible for quite a long time and our education institutions. As for their arguments in favor of this bill, IFPC and its proponents argue that this practice aligns with America's historical educational values and serves as an essential educational purpose. Blaine, the president of Idaho Family Policy Center, said that the Bible has and does shape public morality, history, and language. In conclusion, like most things in politics, the proposal is facing some opposition, granted not super clear, with some lawmakers expressing reservations about its advancements. Wasn't exactly able to find the clearest ones. The bill's fate remains uncertain as it moves through the legislative process, but if you are in support or against it, IFPC are the people that you want to be reaching out on that. Which, if you like this midweek report so far, do us a favor and hit the like button and subscribe/follow button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. It helps us stay connected with you and helps us reach more folks who love Idaho just like you and helps you to be engaged and informed about what's happening in your state. Stepping out of education here and into a more national thing, but related to Idaho, in an encouraging move to bolster American energy independence, U.S. Senator Jim Risch and Mike Crapo of Idaho, along with Stephen Daines of Montana, have introduced the Supporting Made in America Energy Act. The legislation aims to unleash American energy potential by mandating regular oil and gas lease sales, both onshore and offshore. The bill requires 4 annual onshore lease sales in top producing states, 2 annual offshore sales in the Gulf of America, wink, and 6 sales in the Alaskan Cook Inlet over a decade. Their argument for this, Senator Risch emphasized the act's alignment with President Trump's vision of American energy leadership, stating it would remove barriers to access the nation's rich resources. Senator Crapo, for his part, highlighted the proposal's potential to enhance U.S. energy independence and reduce reliance on adversaries like China. Moving forward, the bill has garnered support from several Republican senators, reflecting a unified push in the Republican Party for American energy dominance and economic prosperity. Now it'll be interesting to see how it then goes through committee. And coming from the national back to the local here, Idaho lawmakers have introduced a bill to establish Media Shield law. They aim to protect journalists and their confidential sources. The bill, sponsored by Representative Marco Erickson and Barbara Earhart, would prevent reporters from being compelled to disclose their sources or unpublished materials in legal proceedings, exempting cases involving national security or imminent harm. Idaho is currently one of the only 10 states without such protections, to give you a little bit of context there. The bill also comes as some news organizations are facing increased subpoenas for confidential information. Idaho Press Club President Melissa Davlin highlighted its importance, citing cases where anonymous sources hesitated to share critical information due to fears of exposure. Last year, East Idaho News and Boise Dev faced legal challenges over source confidentiality, so that's where that's coming up. As for the takeaway on this, the proposed law draws inspiration from long-standing shield laws in Alabama and Kentucky. While legislatures unanimously approved this introduction, some raised concerns about potential malicious use by litigation organizations. The bill, however, is expected to proceed to a public hearing soon. And then stepping out of the legislature and going a little bit more local, a place we love very dearly, Idaho City Council elections may see a significant change if proposed legislation by Senator Josh Cole, a Republican from Twin Falls, passes. The bill in question that would do this aims to lower population thresholds for cities requiring to elect city council members by districts from 100,000 to 25,000 residents. This change would affect Idaho's 14 largest cities, expanding beyond Boise, Meridian, and Nampa, which currently use district-based elections. As for the argument on this, Cole argues that the current at-large system becomes inadequate as cities grow larger. However, the bill leaves unanswered questions about the transition process and the fate of current office holders. In conclusion, with a 120 days requirement to establish districts before elections, concerns have been raised about the feasibility of implementation, especially for cities in the midst of council member terms. The proposal is still in the early stages, awaiting input from city officials across the state, but if you are interested in giving input on it when it goes to committee, that would be your best chance to do so. And speaking of city council meetings, Idaho's open meeting law may soon require public comment periods at all government meetings. Specifically for this legislation put forward by Representative Chris Bruce, a Republican from Kuna, is mandating public input opportunities, either in person or remotely, for all public meetings across the state. The bill would require meeting agendas to include information on how residents can testify. It also prohibits governments from requiring advance submission of comments or closing signups prematurely. If a remote access issue occurs, the meeting must pause until resolved. This includes city councils, county commissions, and various boards overseeing local services. The proposal aims to increase transparency and citizen engagement in government decision-making processes, which we are all for here at Local Yocal Idaho. Highly recommend it. But moving forward, this initiative follows a similar proposal from last year that didn't advance, sadly. The bill received unanimous approval from the Ways and Means Committee, with both Republicans and Democrats supporting it. Look, we can reach across the aisle, just not on contentious issues for obvious reasons. Hey, if you found any of these stories interesting or ones you haven't heard before, any friends and family that you think should know it, please don't hesitate to share it. Your shares help us spread the word about our beautiful state and help Idahoans stay informed and engaged about what's happening in their local communities. And speaking of local things, something that is dear to all Idahoans, firearms, a revised version of Idaho's Muzzleloader bill, House Bill 128, has stirred the conversation over the use of sabots in muzzleloader-only hunts. Specifically, sponsored by Representative Ron Mendive, the bill would prevent the Idaho Fish and Game Commission from banning sabots, or if you don't know what they are, plastic jacket bullets that improve accuracy and range. As for the arguments on it, critics argue that this could undermine the primitive nature of muzzleloader seasons, not super primitive, but modern age kind of, which are designed to offer hunters a challenge with limited technology. Supporters believe the legislation ensures fairness, but opponents argue such decisions should remain under the Commission's purview. But adding a little context for those of us that aren't hunters, while last year's board bill introduced penalizing powder and 209 primers, this year's version focuses only on sabots. However, opposition remains strong. The Idaho Fish and Game Commission and Idaho Wildlife Federation have voiced concerns that allowing sabots could increase hunter success rates and jeopardize these special seasons. But moving forward, a report from the Hunting and Advanced Technology Working Group, man, that's a long one, later this year may further shape this contentious issue. This bill is now under review by the House Resource Committee if you are interested. And keeping with the theme of the great outdoors and hunting, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, or IDFG, is proposing changes to the elk hunting in south central Idaho, sparking debate among hunters and conservationists. Those two sometimes are always in a debate. Specifically, the issue is declining elk populations in the Smoky Bennett zone have prompted the IDFG to consider reducing cow elk harvests by 20%. This includes decreasing B tags and modifying antlerless hunts in specific units to reduce competition. Conversely, in the Big Desert Zone, where elk herds are causing crop damage, the IDFG proposes increasing B-tag quotas and extending antlerless hunts to address the issue. In the South Hill Zone, growing elk numbers and crop predation necessitates an unlimited only weapon B-tag hunting in Unit 56. For all those that aren't hunters like myself, what's the takeaway of that? These proposed changes aim to balance elk populations, mitigate crop damage, and address landowner concerns while maintaining hunting opportunities, because that's a big thing here in the state of Idaho. For those interested or understood part of the things of what I said, the public comment period is open until February 23rd, allowing stakeholders to voice their opinions before the Fish and Game Commission makes a decision in March. Going from hunting and a little bit to trapping, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game has confirmed that wolf trapping and snaring will remain prohibited in the public lands in Blaine County's Game Unit 48 and 49. Specifically, Director Jim Friedrichs stated that the department will not entertain changes to the long-standing ban this spring. The decision comes despite a proposal from the Foundation for Wildlife Management to reinstate wolf trapping and expand hunting options in these units. Looking at that ban a little bit, it is in place since wolf trapping was first legalized in Idaho around 2011, covering the Big and Little River watersheds. Game Unit 48 spans about 390,000 acres from the Moonstone Landing to the Galena Summit, while Unit 49 covers about 500,000 acres from Cary to Trail Creek Summit. As for the local reaction on this, local officials including Blaine County Commissioner Muff Davis and Idaho Senate Ron Taylor expressed support maintaining the ban, citing potential conflicts with outdoor recreation. If you disagree with that, might want to reach out to them. But moving forward, the Idaho Fish and Game Commission did not discuss the proposal during its annual meeting in January and will not be open for public scoping for the upcoming hunting and trapping season. Take that as you will on that one. And speaking of something that sadly quite often happens when you're in the great outdoors, getting lost and needing communication, satellite messaging technology is revolutionizing backcountry safety in Idaho. With dozens of search and rescue missions each year, this innovation will be a game changer, if you remember it being talked about at the Super Bowl, but we'll get to that shortly. If you didn't know, iPhones running iOS 18 have been able to send emergency SOS messages via satellite, requiring only a clear view of the sky, because satellite kind of needs to be able to see you. And then the Super Bowl part, T-Mobile is also launching a similar service called T-Mobile Starlink. If you remember, Starlink has to do with SpaceX and Elon, which is currently in beta testing. As for what this means for Idaho, Robert Showalter from the Boise County Search and Rescue emphasized that the life-saving potential of this technology. Even without satellite-enabled phones, rescue teams advise attempting to send messages periodically, as brief windows of cellular service may occur when you're out and about. Just a good thing if you're new to the state, because we will have tons of different black spots. But the general takeaway on this, while satellite messaging is promising, experts are stressing the importance of proper planning and informing others of your location before venturing into remote areas, because there's always mistakes that can happen. You can't get to your phone or something. They're also recommending considering dedicated satellite communication devices as backup options, just in the case that your phone dies, because we all know how power hungry those are. Don't want to miss out learning more about Idaho? Make sure to subscribe and follow us on our Substack, where we have all of our wonderful content, or on our YouTube page or Twitter, depending on where you're watching this. And speaking of technology and remote areas, North Idaho College, or NIC, has been named the top institution in Idaho for surgery technology by college faculty, highlighting its exceptional program's achievements. As for what those achievements are, NIC's surgical technology program boasts an impressive 5-year average pass rate of about 98.6%. Can't forget the point there. On certified surgical technology examination, far surpassing the national average of 66.8%. As for a little bit of history on that, since its inception in 2019, the program has graduated 60 students, all of whom have secured employment before finishing their studies, with starting wages exceeding about $30 an hour. Got to pay for those student loans there. Students gain hands-on experience by completing over 140 surgical cases and logging more than 400 clinical hours, supported by partnerships with local healthcare facilities like the Kootenai Health. In conclusion, Program Director Tara Larson-Gilbert praised the collaboration with clinic affiliates, calling it essential for delivering world-class training. The program recently received a stellar 10-year accreditation rating from the Accreditation Review Council on Education in Surgical Technologies and Surgical Assisting. Man, you couldn't make that any longer, citing its reputation as a leader in surgical education. And speaking of things with medical, good old Medicaid, it's at a little bit of a crossroads here in Idaho. Once touted as a solution, it is now threatened to drown Idaho in red tape. Specifically, conservative lawmakers listening to the concerns of taxpayers are considering a course correction, mainly on the tenet of why should hardworking Idahoans bear the burden of a program that primarily benefits able-bodied adults. For some time, expansion has diverted resources from the truly vulnerable, which it aims to help, children and disabled, while also any attempts to try to change it has caused fears of constituents losing coverage, which we would argue is overstated. The main solution, though, however, is a free market approach, empowering individuals to find affordable healthcare solutions, which would prove probably more effective in the long term than some government program. Some argue that cutting expansion would lead to crowded emergency rooms, but responsible reforms, including work requirements and benefit caps, can ensure that Medicaid serves as a safety net, as it was originally meant to be. In conclusion, Idaho must act now while the opportunity is before us for its financial future and to restore common sense priorities in the medical industry. And speaking of medical and having some choices, a controversial bill aimed at expanding medical freedom has surprisingly received pushback. Kind of a shocker on that or not. The Senate State Affairs Committee sent Senate Bill 1023 for amendment after business representatives raised concerns about its broad definition of medical intervention. As for what that means with that bill and looking at it, the Idaho Medical Freedom Act would prohibit businesses, schools, and governments from mandating medical interventions, including vaccines, which if you listen to our past things, Idaho is one of the higher states in the union for lack of vaccinations. The arguments for that is that supporters argue it protects personal freedom, while Health Freedom Defense Fund President Lisa Manukia calling medical decisions a sacred, God-given, inalienable right, end quote. However, like most things in politics, critics worry about the potential consequences, such as affecting hand sanitation requirements. I'm surprised that's the main concern there. The bill's language will be refined to address these concerns as it goes for amendment, with Senate President Pro Temp Kelly Anton emphasizing the importance of personal freedom while acknowledging the need for clarification. In conclusion, as the bill moves forward, lawmakers must balance individual rights with public health considerations, just kind of what you got to do with those things, setting the stage for a contentious debate on medical autonomy here in Idaho. Coming to our last story here, one that you may or may not have heard, and speaking of controversy, a federal lawsuit filed by Caldwell police officer Elisa Butler accuses police chief Rex Ingram of creating a hostile work environment through gender-based harassment and retaliation. The suit, which also names the city and police department, alleges Ingram engaged in inappropriate behavior, including attempts to fraternize with Butler outside of work, and recounting disturbing stories of misconduct during a work trip. Butler claims she faced retaliation after reporting these incidents, including suspension and reassignment within the department. As for what Caldwell's response has been on this, Mayor Jerome Wagner expressed confidence in Ingram's leadership during a press conference, but declined to address specific allegations due to the ongoing litigations, because legal stuff. Launched an investigation into the claims while Butler remains on leave, citing post-traumatic stress disorder caused by the workplace stress. In conclusion, the lawsuit seeks damages for emotional distress, lost wages, and harms to Butler's career. Ingram, who joined Caldwell's force in 2022 after serving with the LAPD, denies the allegations as the legal proceedings unfold. And speaking of unfolding, I gotta unfold some other stuff myself, so I have to head. Thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you like the Midweek Report, make sure to check out our other content, specifically our Idaho bill breakdowns, where we break Idaho's bills into common plain English for you to understand. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or on Twitter by tweeting us at LocalYokelIdaho. With a small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued assistance and support. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.